Echo Essentials podcast.
I'm Dave Dale.
And I'm Chris Pekarsky. And today we wrap up our entire election coverage from the 2025 Canadian federal election with our good friend and now two-time guest, Dr. David Tabachnick. And it was a good episode today, Dave.
I thought it was great. I like talking to him. He has a wealth of knowledge and personality to go with it.
Oh, yeah. I think you had a lot of fun today. And you'll see it, you'll hear it. But we had a really good time talking about at large the federal landscape and the machinations of what happened, what's going to happen, and obviously some stuff locally. But he was great. He seems like he's really in his element when he talks about politics, for sure, especially like historical relevances to like local stuff.
We talked about Carney's upside and challenges. We talked about the conservative leaders' challenges and the situation, and I still can't pronounce his name.
He's trying not to.
PP.
Pierre Poilievre.
There you go. That's
there we
it,
go.
right?
We got
Poilievre. And we talked about Alberta and how tough a road it is to actually leave the Confederation. And we talked about the vote split here in Nipissing-Timiskaming and what is that split and what would it mean in the future. We talked about the stats and who voted for who. But what we didn't really talk about, and I wanted to, was the fact that I don't think the far-right guys online that are up on there putting their flags upside down and saying the country's going to hell right now and they're all sad and about ready to jump off roofs, that doesn't help. I don't think anybody's going to join you in with your party if you're going to act like that on social media.
I can't help but laugh because it seems like you're crusading in these comment sections and these Facebook posts where all these very extreme reactionary viewpoints are coming out, and you're like holding the flag, you're staying on the turf, you're staying to come back, and I could just see you just like typing away furiously at like 3 a.m.
Well, no, I have some great conversations, but my observation is if you're calling people dumb and stupid, you're not going to make very many friends. That's all I got to say.
And ultimately, if you call, again, it seems very reflective in the vote and the turnout, but if you call Canada broken after 3 years of doing it, surprise, surprise, you might not get elected federally or even in your own riding.
Apparently.
Yeah. What's that?
Apparently.
We'll see. But we have a great episode for you today. Can't wait for you to listen to it. Dave and I are pretty proud of it. It was a great conversation. Before we get to that today, we want to talk about today's sponsor, Source for Sports.
Sports aren't just what we do, they're who we are. Source for Sports North Bay is your advocate, your local support system, and your biggest fan. 1321 Fisher Street has grown from a place where knowledgeable experts can help you find exactly the gear you need, to the hotbed of team uniforms, apparel and fanwear, to a community stronghold for all the things that truly matter to you and your family's sports journey. We love helping you find your first pair of skates, as much as we relish supporting local leagues, teams, and athletes. Wherever your sports journey takes you, make sure you visit Source for Sports North Bay at 1321 Fisher Street so we can help you along your way.
Today, we have our entire post-election coverage wrap-up with Professor Dr. David Tabachnick. David, how are you?
I'm doing very well. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. It's been a couple of weeks since we had you in.
Yep.
A lot has changed, some hasn't changed, and today we're going to talk all about it. So, Dave, first impressions. Let's cut it off. What do you got?
Well, it's an epic historical election. We were very fortunate to be able to take part in it and to have an ability to interview the candidates, talk about the issues, and to see the country wake up into a new reality and a patriotic one at that. So I like it. There's a lot of sad faces out there. I see somebody posted a upside down Canadian flag as their profile today because they're crying in their beers here. So it's unfortunate that everybody thinks the country's broken when I think it's in a good place. What do you think?
Well, the historic elements are many, but just as far as electoral politics goes, it's the turnaround of the Liberal Party, obviously, here with Trudeau's resignation and, of course, Trump's tariff threats, as well as, of course, Mark Carney swooping in to save the day for the Liberals. There was a massive turnaround in the polls, some 25-plus point changes in the polling, even though the polling might not have been as accurate as maybe some pollsters had hoped. And the fact that they've gotten this fourth mandate is fairly historic, a third minority government in a row. We'll see if they can turn that minority into a majority, which is something we can talk about. I'm not suggesting there's more counting to be done, but perhaps some MPs can be convinced to cross the floor.
Interesting. It's funny that you mentioned that, because this is my preparation for today. I was looking into what a lot of the federal journalists and news outlets were saying, and they talked about this about what would it look like, what would the process look like, and what would have to happen for them to push for an official majority to get 172 seats as opposed to the current 169 that the Liberals currently have. What's that look like? I'm totally in the dark on this.
I think all it takes is a flu at this point. One Conservative stays home, one right? That's all you need. 4 other people not to vote.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if you recall, I mean, I think I was only 7 at the time, but in 1979, Joe Clark miscounted the number of MPs he needed to pass his budget, and that was the end of his government. So that's kind of the reverse problem. Here, I think you possibly could entice MPs from other parties, whether the NDP or the Conservatives. I'm a little doubtful whether the Bloc would be part of this thinking. Perhaps even Elizabeth May be part of this thinking, the one Green Party candidate, to cross the floor if you can't say inducement because that's illegal, but if the enticement was great enough. And, I was thinking about this because in 2006, something along the lines of this happened, not quite the same circumstances, but the Liberal MP David Emerson, who I believe was elected in British Columbia, he was offered a cabinet position to join the Conservatives, and indeed he did walk across the floor, and boy, oh boy, his constituents were not too happy with him. So that's the danger with that scenario if you're an MP. But being part of government, being in cabinet, that is an awfully good thing for any riding, that the population of that riding can get benefits from that. So it is a possibility, and I'm sure it's crossing a lot of Liberals' minds right now.
Interesting. I wonder where that would come from. Be interesting if somebody from out west crossed the floor, right?
Well, yeah, I think that would be ideal. Yeah, if someone from Alberta, for example. I mean, I'm quite doubtful. I think
they have one.
Yeah, I think that's quite doubtful if that would occur.
Yeah.
Certainly not the lone NDP there in Edmonton is not going to do it. She has perhaps leadership aspirations. So, I'm just talking in generalities here.
For sure.
But the math is there. 3 people, it ain't much. And majority government matters in Canada for obvious reasons.
So we talked about some specifics, but let's talk about the generals. For those who may have not fully caught up to us yet, we're recording this on Wednesday, April 30th. I almost said August. What day am I living in here? April 30th.
It feels like August.
Honestly, it was a pretty late night for me on Monday. I'm still trying to catch up on my sleep. But where it presently stands, we kind of alluded to it earlier, the Liberals secured a strong minority government at 169 seats. And there's a lot of movement. 2 parties in particular had a lot of quote-unquote decimation. The NDPs and the Bloc, they had a lot of seat changes. Mm-hmm. In terms of gains, the Liberals, the Conservatives had a lot of gains. In Ontario specifically, the Conservatives had quite a bit, maybe more than people thought. And maybe that was where some of the movement happened from being a projected potential majority to a stronger minority. So we talked about moving seats. We talked about Elizabeth May. One of the ones that we did want to talk about that I think we kind of predicted early was Singh, Jagmeet Singh, leader, well, I guess now former leader of the federal NDP. He's officially stepped down and will assist in the interim because not only did they lose a bunch of seats, he also lost his own seat. He actually came third in his own riding in, I believe, Burnaby Central, if I'm correct.
Yeah, that sounds right.
So lots of changes. It did seem like we kind of went towards more of a 2-party race this time. Yeah. I think we kind of knew that, but some of the numbers are really interesting.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, 2 parties in the 40%. What is it? The Liberals in around 45, 46. The Conservatives around 42, 43. Is that right?
44 and 42 are pretty close.
Oh, okay, so I was in the ballpark. That's quite amazing. I don't think we've had results like that since the NDP came onto the scene. And that just goes to show you that The concern, I think, of Pierre Poilievre being the next prime minister was enough to have a lot of NDP supporters switch their votes, at least temporarily. Jack Layton asked Liberals to allow him to borrow their votes. It went the other way this time, I think, and Jagmeet Singh was not the beneficiary of that at all, losing handily in his own riding, as you said, Chris, and having to step down as leader. There's not much to choose from as far as sitting MPs go for the NDP. You know, the name Charlie Angus comes to my mind. He did run against Jagmeet Singh for the leadership in the recent past. I don't know if he has any interest in getting back into politics so soon after his retirement, but I think he would be a formidable leader and certainly someone from our region who would understand Northern Ontario.
He's the one that I think would be set up and has the what it takes to do it, and the voice, the way he goes about things, he gets just about as negative as the conservative guys do, but he matches their energy, right? So, originally that's what I thought he was doing when he was doing his tour, and he was. I thought he was just sort of making moves towards that leadership. He knew what was going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, he's a very talented fellow. I mean, a great writer. I've read some of his work. His book on cobalt is actually very worthwhile, very well written, very interesting. I would recommend that to anyone, regardless of your politics. Obviously, he's a musician as well, which is interesting. Mm-hmm. And he's a firebrand, you know, as you were suggesting. I mean, he can give a speech. That is for sure. And I think he does represent something that the NDP needs, that return to a more working class base for the NDP, a little less concern about, I guess, what the Conservatives call woke politics. I don't like that term particularly. You could say identity politics as well. There are some important considerations there, but I just don't think that appeals to most Canadian voters. And we did see, and I think we talked about this last time we met, that the Conservatives have taken that union vote, and that is a rather remarkable thing. And I'm talking about, outside of the public service, those private union voters, those blue-collar workers, in auto plants, for example, they voted Conservative. That is quite exceptional, and that was the NDP's base, no longer.
Yeah. And I think that might have been the Ontario situation where pollsters were looking at the wrong information, I guess, because it didn't work out the way they're predicting.
That's right. And I like to remind my students, again, we have 343 elections on election night, not just one. So it is a challenge. We have to sort of dig into those individual ridings, and many of those ridings were redrawn. So the pollsters had a challenge, and they weren't completely wrong, but it was lower than projected. I think the latest polls suggested a Liberal majority. They came just shy of that, obviously. And I think the Conservatives did better than some of the polling suggested they would, and I think you're right. They did much better in Ontario, certainly in the 905. That's surprising. And in our region as well. They picked up the Sudbury East. What is it? Sudbury East, Manitoulin? I'm forgetting something here. It's a three-barreled riding name, and that came as a bit of a surprise. But apparently having Manitoulin attached to that riding made the difference. A little more blue there, and the Conservative candidate wins.
So I will want to talk about local, semi-local a little bit later, but that's a really good segue because we talked about demographics or reliable voter base. We talk about, the NDP losing, I guess, quote unquote, the faith of the working class. Well, the Conservatives also nagged something else as well. They gathered a lot of the vote of the younger votes. I think it was the 18 to 35. I think they had the leading percentage of, I think, was estimated between 39 to 42% of voters who were between 18 to 34, which historically has been different. So essentially what they're kind of alluding to was, a lot of Gen Z or a lot of younger millennials were voting Conservative, which has been different in the last couple elections.
Yeah, I would say so. Now, I mean, I'm sure there are lots of different explanations for that. But in part, I think if you're a young person and you're looking at the last 10 years of Liberal rule, and looking at things like housing costs and affordability more generally, I mean, it's not unreasonable for you to conclude that this government isn't going to do anything for you. And Pierre Poilievre was successful with that change message to a point. And so if you're a young person and you want change, be able to afford a house, have a job, have the same kind of lifestyle your parents have had, then maybe the Conservatives convinced you that was worth a try. Whether that would have panned out for everybody with a Conservative government, we will not find out because they did not win. But I think that does explain some of it. And a change election it was, but not the way Pierre Poilievre wanted that change, obviously. Mark Carney was the agent of change, not the Conservatives.
Yeah, I don't think any other Liberal could have achieved what Mark Carney did. I think people saw in him somebody they could trust to be sane, reasonable, and forceful with a knowledge base that nobody else can match. People were asking me what it would take for me to vote Conservative. I said, you need a better leader like Mark Carney. See, I got his name wrong too. I think it has a lot to do, and I don't go that far into his background, but I sense that was somebody that I could understand. He represented my dad's generation, even though he's my age. So there's that. And also, but I would like to get to the point where, because I think we'll talk about the leadership of the Conservatives, the situation that they're in. He did gain 20 seats. He did achieve something for them. But I think it was achieved under circumstances that he can't replicate again.
Yeah, that's right. Look, my line here is they snatched defeat from the jaws of victory. There's a ceiling on the Conservative vote, it seems. Now, I don't know actually how true that is. I've just said it, but now I question myself because maybe there's a ceiling on Pierre Poilievre's Conservative Party.
That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah, he appeals to a lot of people. He certainly appeals to base Conservative voters. He speaks their language. He's one of them. He's been a Conservative since he was a teenager, and a very active Conservative as well. So. That has served him very well, and he's kept his caucus together. But there cannot but be rumblings and grumblings against him now. And he has said he's going to stay on, but in a way that's not his choice. That's the party's choice. That's the caucus's choice. And yeah, he didn't do terribly, but he lost his own seat, as we know, right? And he really failed in his number one goal, to get government for the Conservatives. After 3 terms of Liberals, there's going to be now a 4th term for the Liberals. That's a failure. And I frankly will be surprised if he's able to stay on. I know he wants to, but I'd be surprised if he can.
So this is interesting because we're going to bring in how he lost Carleton to, I believe, what's his name? Bruce Vanjoy. I almost called him Greyjoy. That's Game of Thrones. However, it feels very Game of Thrones because there was many houses in that market competing. Because I think the ballot was 91 people in Carleton, which was
they
insane.
did the long ballot.
This was wild.
This is an activist movement, right? Yeah. And there was a huge turnout in that riding. I think it was something like 79% turned out in Poilievre's riding, and I'm not sure if it plays out that long ballot worked. There were hundreds of votes for many of those candidates, so it might have factored in. But of course, people could have been voting for those people.
There wasn't 3,000 votes, and he was shy that much, right?
Yeah,
something like
there
that.
Was.
Yeah, I'll take a look, but it was he did lose.
So I
saw
people complaining about it, saying that it wasn't fair to have a ballot, a long ballot like that. How could they strong supporters find his name? I'm like, okay.
Starts with a P.
I think it's a little fairer than a truckers convoy.
Yeah,
camping out for 3 weeks.
Yeah,
I'll go on record as that.
Okay. As far as people being hard done by, yes, exactly.
But also, if that was truly the issue, then it's either an issue of name recognition or trust in the person. If they couldn't find him on the ballot, or they didn't trust him enough on that long ballot to pick him one out of 90 others.
Well, the right-wingers are online right now calling everybody that voted dumb and stupid, right? So if they're calling their own supporters that they couldn't find their own leader's name on a ballot, then okay, maybe you're right.
Yeah, look, I mean, he has held that seat for 20 years, so it's not as though the people of that riding are not familiar with him or really didn't want him. But he lost. He lost, and he had turned enough people off during the run-up to the campaign and during the campaign itself. And so he is not a sitting MP. And as I'm sure your viewers and listeners know, he'll have to run in a by-election. And when that by-election will occur is completely out of his control, short of course, convincing one of the elected Conservatives to drop out. And that does happen, of course. Leaders make that demand. Favors are given later on. And again, you're not actually allowed to do that. That's called an inducement. That's against the Elections Act. But surprise, surprise, that does happen.
I would assume he'd also probably try to take a seat out of Alberta, maybe closer to his, his initial home area, where it'd probably be more of an easier hit, I'd assume.
I wouldn't necessarily say that. I think you sometimes go against type. Depending upon who you're running against, you would maybe go into a weaker place. Now, if you lose again, that's the gamble. But if you are able to make a great showing in a place where maybe Conservatives do okay, but not like winning by 50 points in some riding in Alberta. I mean, that's almost a sign of weakness, I would say, if you just go to the safe spot. Although maybe he's in a big rush to get back to the House of Commons, and he is a very effective opposition leader. We'll have to give him that. Who is going to be standing in for him? I mean, he does have a decent bench there, but he is a uniquely talented opposition leader. I would put it that way. So you might end up being right. We'll have to pay attention to that.
I would think that, from an outsider's look, he ruled fairly iron-fisted, right? And it was his way or the highway, and you can't get out of that bubble. And I think the only way you can do that, and I heard some pundits talk about this, is that he was already in debt to many people as promised cabinet positions, right? Well, he has nothing to offer right now.
Yep, that's right. That's right.
And there's nothing but opportunity right now.
So, yes, there are people waiting in the wings.
I'm sure the knives are being sharpened.
Yeah. Politics is, not a blood sport, but it is a tough game indeed. And other people want his job. There's no doubt about it. And all of the kind words that he's been getting, short of from a few prominent names, I don't know if that's going to be enough. I think, we'll just have to wait and see. He's going to try. He's going to try to stay on. I
wonder what the Trump factor is.
Oh, as far as him staying on?
Yeah, because and sorry to interrupt, but the Trump factor, I think, had a lot to do with his inability to pivot from his reputation as emulating the far right of the states, right? Yep. The whole Republican sort of game plan. You can't shake that off, I don't think. And even the gentleman that was elected MP that was angry at Doug Ford for meddling as far as
Jamil Giovanni.
Yes. A good friend of J.D. Vance's, they say. All right. Yep. So there's all those tight connections. So depending on how Trump does, then the next year, his first 100 days were epic and historical as well. But if he doesn't recover at all, I think any attachment to that rhetoric would taint PP's future.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, that's the hard thing, I think, about being the leader of the Conservative Party. I mean, there's many hard things, but his base does like Trump. That is for sure, and his rhetoric to some degree matches it. The platform, perhaps a little less so. But if you sort of put yourself in that box, Trump is incredibly unpopular in Canada, and more so right now. So how do you keep your base happy, right, and grow the party? And that has been the challenge for a leader of the Conservative Party, not just Poilievre, but leaders before him, Andrew Scheer, Erin O'Toole, all the way to Stephen Harper and even earlier. That is what they need to do. Or else what the problem can be for them is something that the Liberals have wrestled with in the last few election cycles that they kind of overcame this time, and that is a challenge on their right. Maxime Bernier and the People's Party was really not a factor this time around, and I'm not saying they would ever be a factor, but a new Reform Party. We recall what happened to the Conservatives in the 80s and 90s, and they were wiped out. I mean, we recall that it used to be the Progressive Conservative Party. That party no longer exists. It was basically taken over by the Reform Party. So if a Conservative leader is not able to keep that base, that tough 20 to 30% of their voters happy, they may jump ship. And that is the big fear. So how do you do that sort of thing? The fact that the Liberals were able to sort of envelop the NDP voter, is that something that's just a one-off this time around, or is that something that is going to occur into the future? And that vote splitting that the Conservatives really have relied on may be gone, and that makes their lives much more difficult.
With the election season finally wrapping up, spring finally being here, and summer just around the corner, the season of change is upon us. Whether you're going on cross-province trips or you're taking your kids somewhere, doing sports activities, change is here. So why not change your vehicle? Our friends down at North Bay Toyota, Danny, has all the things you're going to possibly require for a new vehicle. Looking for something that's more fuel efficient, especially with gas being cheaper? All these options are great. Look for the RAV4 for being a more fuel efficient vehicle. Looking for a little more style? The Corolla Cross might be your car for you. If you're looking for something a little more rugged, especially on those nice Northern Ontario spring roads, can't go wrong with the Tacoma. There is something for everyone at Toyota. In extra space, a good example is the Highlander. This thing has so much room. I wish I had a little more room in my car. The Highlander seems to answer that need. I might have to go talk to Danny. But there's something for everyone at North Bay Toyota. With the season being so busy, it's time to get in and go to North Bay Toyota at 640 McEwen or online at northbaytoyota.com. Thank you for supporting local content, local stories, local voices at North Bay Echo.
Imagine the power behind your generosity, month after month. When you join the I Give Monthly Club, your support helps provide state-of-the-art medical equipment and essential care for our community. Every month, your gift, big or small, adds up to something powerful, ensuring our local hospital has the tools it needs to provide exceptional care for our friends and loved ones. Join over 220 generous monthly donors who are already making a life-changing impact. From essential equipment like MRI machines to life-saving cancer care, your commitment, month after month, helps transform lives. Signing up is easy. Visit nbrhcfoundation.ca to join. Your monthly gift helps ensure our community's healthcare stays strong and accessible all year round.
I think Charlie Angus would be the answer to that question, because I think he could win back a lot of the NDPers, and depending on how the next 4 years goes, and whether Mark Carney is successful at implementing some type of glue that keeps Canada together. Alberta, we could talk about the system for leaving the Confederation. It's not as easy as just one referendum. People don't understand that.
It's almost impossible, frankly, but we can...
Because from my understanding, before I get too far into that, I just want...
Okay, yes.
Sorry, but we will talk about Alberta for a second, because I think it's an important conversation. But the other thing about somebody online was challenging, asked the question, what would it take for you dumb Liberals to recognize that you need to have a conservative government? And my pointed answer was... perhaps if you got a leader that talked respectfully and had a following that weren't calling people dumb, and that if you submitted a costed platform more than 5 days before the election, we might fall for that kind of idiocy.
I like that. Yeah. I mean, obviously, before Justin Trudeau resigned, many people that voted Liberal this time around were going to vote Conservative. There's no doubt about it. And so they were voting against Trudeau and his legacy. Perhaps he was just too to the left for many voters. And Carney, I don't think, can be called anything but a centrist. I would even say some of the policies he's been talking about are center-right. Mm-hmm. And that's not unusual for the Liberal Party. I mean, you know, you can look at a Paul Martin or a Jean Chrétien, and they kind of look like a Mark Carney, you know. Trudeau was a different kind of Liberal leader, and it worked for a while. And then it really didn't work. And, of course, his own party got quite tired of him. And, I guess he's looking for another job right now.
Well, I think
He'll be a consultant.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the last time I saw Justin was in a Canadian Tire Instagram photo. But
Right.
I mean, I'm really glad, Professor, you brought up the whole conservative or the progressive conservative part, because I imagine I was listening to an interview today, I believe it was maybe today or yesterday, from the MP who was elected in Parry Sound, who was advocating, or I guess it was really Parry Sound, who was advocating for
Parry Sound, Muskoka.
Parry Sound, Muskoka. Thank you. Who was advocating for Pierre Poilievre to stay. Sure. And it did feel like in that conversation, I think it was with CBC again, that, whether there was a part of the progressive conservatives who were still in the base who might have different feeling on the direction of the party and how that might potentially direct the clash internally, whether if it's going to be Pierre or someone else.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And was it Scott Atchison, I think, is the MP there? Yes, and I think he ran for the leadership at some point, or maybe that was provincially. I'm trying to remember.
I recognize the name.
Yeah,
I have to take a look at that. But
yeah.
It is Scott.
I definitely, So, can the Conservatives be a centrist party? I think is the question you beg here.
The great debate, yeah.
And that comes back to my point. If you move too much to the center and you're a conservative, you're going to alienate your base. Can you bring your base to the center with you? I don't think so. I think that the right, and I'm saying far right in a Canadian context, I mean in a relative way, they're not interested in centrist policies. They're interested in what they would view as right-wing policies. Call it limited government, defund the CBC, all of these sorts of things. That's a big applause line for the Conservatives when they say things like that. And most Canadians just aren't there. Most Canadians are in the center. And that's why the Liberals, of course, historically have been so successful. And as I sometimes say to my students, this is the Liberals' sort of campaign strategy. Which way is the wind blowing? Yeah. And that's the direction they go.
A natural governing party.
Yeah, that's right. And so they've won, I think it's 75% of the elections in Canadian history, and there's a reason for that. They appeal to that centrist Canadian voter, who, of course, themselves move around depending on time and place, but they find out where that center is, and that's it. And Trudeau was able to do that for a little while, and then he lost. He lost the center, and that's where Pierre Poilievre's growth came from. And then, of course, Carney took it back, and that's more or less the story of the election, I think.
Yeah,
Well, I was going to say to your point that, and I think these numbers are right, in the last election here, 2021, we had PPC votes at about 5,000 or so. And
federally?
Federally. The Gallant, when he ran, I think.
Oh, you mean locally?
Yeah, locally.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so I'm sorry, locally.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
We should talk locally.
Well, we should. And actually, I was like looking up, like, how do we segue
and they were down
into
to 500 this time.
Yes.
Right?
So,
and I know PPC guys, and they said they're voting for the Conservatives against the Liberals, even though they say the Conservatives aren't far right enough.
Right.
And they just say that, right? They said they're not really. They were more like liberals, just like our John Jansen said, right? He says they're not conservative; they're liberal light. And that PP side, next election, if they don't have a different leader or a different strategy, you're going to lose that right. I think that far
That's right.
Yeah.
And whether it goes to the People's Party or some other party, I mean, I think the parallel more recently than the Reform Party would be how Rachel Notley became the Premier of Alberta. That was a split between the Wild Rose Party and the Conservative Party. I think actually provincially it's still the Progressive Conservative Party in Alberta. And that split the vote on the right, the center right. I mean, obviously Alberta is a conservative leaning to the right province, but yet an NDP premier. Where does that generate from? And quickly, Jason Kenney and Danielle Smith said this cannot go on any longer, and then they amalgamated into the Conservative Party we know that Danielle Smith is the leader of now and the premier of Alberta, and that does work in a context of Alberta. But if you can split the vote, the Conservative vote in Alberta, you certainly can do it across Canada. And again, that goes back to my point, the challenge that the Conservatives have. The fact that they are in the 40% actually, again, is a huge credit to their leader. And one of the things, of course, that may convince people to allow him to stay on. Because, again, you might get a more centrist leader in, and I'm repeating myself, I know, but that 20%, that voter who said, well, I'm a People's Party guy, but I'm going to hold my nose and vote Conservative, they aren't going to do that next time around if you have, well, a liberal light, a true liberal light leader. And I don't call Pierre Poilievre liberal light. That's rather distant to my understanding of his politics.
Yeah.
Interesting. I would think that they say Carney's open to the discussion after we deal with these other higher priorities of electoral reform. That would probably benefit the Liberals even more in a situation with the right split.
Well, yes. I mean, of course, Justin Trudeau ran on that in 2015 and very quickly ran away from that promise. And as I say to my students sometimes, it's no surprise that the party that wins the last election decides that the system that allowed them to win should be maintained. It's kind of ridiculous to expect them to do otherwise, because why would we take away our advantage? Something like a ranked ballot system, which I think is the most likely replacement for first past the post, would make a lot of sense because then you could vote for your choices, first, second, third, fourth, etc. choices. And again, I won't bore your listeners and viewers to how that all works, but essentially the whole thing about throwing your vote away, you know, I really am a Green Party voter, but I'm scared of whatever, so I'm going to vote Liberal. Well, that's factored out in a ranked ballot system. So I do think it would change the landscape almost entirely in Canada, but it may also result in, more and more minority governments. That's a possibility. And certainly the other alternative as proportional representation almost certainly will, which it does by design. Canada really has never had a true coalition government, so that's something also being talked about, a coalition with who? I mean, it would only be the NDP, one assumes, but I don't think that's going to happen. The Liberals are not going to do that.
So we should bring it to local. We talked a bit about a couple different avenues in there. Let's get to it. So very similarly to the federal results, it was very much a two-party race.
Yep.
And who was actually, leading that race on the track changed a little bit during the evening for those who were tracking it. I had a lovely time texting Dave Dale at 1 a.m. On Monday, just keeping up to date. And Dave was like, stop texting me. I need to go to bed. I did not go to bed. I stayed up. I did it for everyone here. I'm kidding. But essentially what happened was, aside from the early gates, Pauline led. And then at some point, right after the early gates, Gary Keller, the Conservative candidate, did take over in terms of the numbers. And then around 1 a.m., once we got down to maybe about 8 or 15 polling stations, things suddenly changed. So I think Gary had at one point in time maybe like a handful of thousand lead. Changed
1,500 at one point with 40 left.
Yeah. And then I went to about 25 votes at 1 a.m. To Pauline. And then that very much changed once it kind of concluded to being about 1,500, give or take. And so we have the numbers here. I'm going to approximate it here. We had about 21,200 advance poll votes in our region, which is a lot, I think. We had about 84,000 eligible voters with about 57,531 votes calculated, which equates to about 68.5% voter turnout. So,
yeah, which is the national average.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So interesting. It did feel kind of very reflective of the federal election for our local area. I mean, it was very close. It was definitely two parties had most of the votes.
Yep.
The Liberals with Paul and Rochefort had about 27,000. The Conservatives with Gary Keller had about 25,700. NDP with Val had about 3,500. PPC got 640, and the Greens with Louise got about 578.
Yeah.
So, it seems like it's very reflective in a certain regard, but it was definitely one or the other.
Yeah, that's right. And, again, our riding has been redrawn from my very basic sort of study of it. It is a little more conservative than it used to be. Without Anthony Rota running, who is a very popular politician with deep roots in Nipissing-Timiskaming, it was a potential pickup for the Conservatives, and it does explain why Gary Keller did so well. Not good enough, of course, to win. They will definitely be looking at this riding next time around as a possible flip. I mean, again, Pauline Rochefort may turn out to be just a gifted MP and really impress a lot of voters and will stay on. But that is definitely on the minds of Conservatives already. That this is upside potential for them. So yeah, for sure.
The riding changes added about 9,000 new votes to the total possible here. So I think it went to, it was 74,000 or something. I think
It went to 84,000.
Yeah,
is
so
where
it went to 84, and I think 75 was the previous. So for the Conservatives, actually, to find that many votes in this riding is historical for them.
Yep.
They've never had that many people vote for him in this riding, but the riding has changed significantly over the years, so it's really hard to understand.
It's hard to compare. It's right. I heard the campaign manager, Bill Ferguson, talk about how they got the most votes ever, and I was just like, well, yes, because the riding changed. I mean, again, it was a very competitive race, no doubt about it. They ran a good campaign, clearly, with a candidate who only had about 6 weeks to kind of figure out what they were going to do. So, it's admirable. Not good enough, though, to
with
win.
a candidate that was not a parachute candidate, but his route only was halfway, right? He's married into the riding.
Yeah.
He's from Alberta. He spent 20 years in Ottawa, and he's a consultant for a political party on one side.
Yeah.
For them to achieve what they did with him, that required a lot of hard work to get a lot of people out.
I agree.
They saw hope. They were figuring they're part of a blue wave as
That's
well,
right.
right?
That's
So
right.
You'd have to have those same ingredients the next time.
That's right. Yeah, and whether Keller would run again, I mean, that's a distant concern at the moment. But you are absolutely right. And yeah, under different circumstances, if you asked me 4 months ago, 3 months ago, I'd say the Conservatives would have likely won this riding. But things changed very quickly, and it was a quality candidate. He was not from here. He was a parachute candidate, but you know what? That's absolutely allowed.
He was less
Mark
of a
Carney's
parachute candidate than many others.
Yeah. Well, Mark Carney is kind of a parachute candidate. I shouldn't say that. He actually does live in Ottawa, but not necessarily in Nepean. So there you have it. So
there, it happens.
It happens all the time, and it's perfectly allowable.
I mean, if I was on the Conservative campaign planning team, I don't know. I mean, I'm not, for starters, but it'd be very interesting to kind of review the process, because they were very, I wouldn't say aggressive, but very active on the campaign trail. They were on social media. They were at every event. They
said
on
they
our
ran
show.
out of lawn signs.
Yeah, and they did what I would assume was a lot of the hard work that you'd want to get done. And so they brought in a politically savvy, experienced person from Ottawa who has local connections, even though not naturally, I guess.
Which replaced somebody that had committed to run for more than a year prior, right?
Right.
With
That's right.
the Cassidy, was her
Villeneuve.
name?
Yeah, Villeneuve,
Yeah.
So,
Cassidy Villeneuve, who had a lot of time to work her election, but didn't work enough and raise enough for what the locals wanted, and didn't see her winning against, somebody like Pauline Rochefort. So
I'm keen to see where they go from here, because, I mean, even if you were to let's say draw 1-to-1, which I know is not politically, fair or even accurate always. If you were to take the closest next lump and put it in PPC, they don't close the gap, right? So what could they do more essentially to take the right and to flip it? That's hard.
Get a local candidate. Yeah. I think that would make a big difference. I mean, it rubs people the wrong way. Outside of what I was just saying, that it was a high-quality candidate, a very well-run campaign, nothing against that campaign team or the candidate, but it rubs people the wrong way. They want someone from our region, and people in Northern Ontario, I think, are particularly have particularly strong feelings about that. Our region is different. Someone who's in Ottawa, hobnobbing with conservative elites, that's not quite our style, is it? We want somebody who knows our concerns, who knows our community. Look, I've lived here for 20 years, but I'm still not from here. You know what I'm saying?
You're not from here until one of your children have a baby here, and that baby is from here, but that's it.
That's it. Well,
quite literally grandfathered in. Is that what you're suggesting here?
That's right. I'm waiting. I'm waiting to be grandfathered in. Yes, still just fathered. So yeah, I don't want to take anything away from the Conservatives. Look, Pauline Rochefort, who has a lot of experience. I mean, she was the mayor of East Ferris. I mean, again, not a big place, don't get me wrong, but she knows how to win, right? That's clear. She was rather unflappable as well. She sort of just maintained her message. She didn't get flustered. And I will add, she's also a Franco-Ontarian, and we have a significant Franco-Ontarian population in this riding. And again, I'm not playing the language card or the ethnic card, but yeah, that's something you consider. If you're a Franco-Ontarian and you say, I want my interests being represented in Parliament Hill, who do I look to? I look to Pauline Rochefort. And
same with the Indigenous people in the area. That would be their natural lean, other than the NDP. If it's not the NDP, it's the Liberals, just because of their historical context and dealing with them in the last
10
couple
years.
of decades.
Yeah, well, I'd say so. And yeah, just to segue quickly, not leaving local politics for very long, but that's Trudeau's legacy, I would say. Like, you can take a lot of shots at the man. He wore colorful socks, oh dear, but he did so many important things as far as the reconciliation file goes. Again, criticisms can be still made, but most successful prime minister on that file, and a file, of course, that had been ignored for almost the entire history of our country. And so, he should be congratulated and remembered for that.
Yeah, for sure. I think Pauline's experience in dealing with her council is at least half very on the right side, right?
Sure. Are you referring to East Ferris, sorry? Or you're, okay.
East Ferris, right? So she deals with this split, you would say, in people's perspectives every day there.
Yeah.
Right. So it's not new. It would be very interesting what East Ferris is going to do to replace her, because I'm not sure the person that won deputy mayor is going to be appointed by the other councillors, and there's going to be some shenanigans going on there.
Shenanigans, you say?
If I can say it. I can't spell it, but I can.
I mean, I'm curious because, I don't know the next steps. I mean, I'm keen to know, and maybe we'll have some people in on future episodes. We'll see. But, what's the timeline on that look like? Are they have to figure it out soon? Do they have to appoint deputy mayor in the interim? Is there a by-election? What happens now?
But they have a certain set period. I think it's 90 days to decide how they're going to do it. Then they have to do it after that.
Okay.
But before we go, and more importantly, Alberta and succession, is that the word?
That's the word.
I was looking at the post that sort of said the actual rules of leaving, and it starts with a referendum. And I know Alberta just changed its minimum signatures required to trigger a referendum from 600,000 to 117,000.
Yeah.
So they're making the pathway easy to get the referendum, but after that, it's not an easy. It just starts a negotiation with the other
That's right.
stakeholders.
That's right. That was, I think, the Clarity Act we're talking about here. Yeah. And this happened after the last referendum in Quebec. Can a province unilaterally leave Confederation? And the answer that the Supreme Court has supported is no, you can't. It has to be a negotiated, if you will, bilateral agreement between the federal government and the province asking to be leave.
The treaty representatives are actually elevated to players in that negotiation and not just stakeholders.
That's right. And again, Quebec had to deal with that.
I think it's Treaty 8 all over across the oil fields up north.
Yes, and I was just sort of making a comparison to the Northern Cree in Quebec who had a referendum of their own the same time as the last referendum in the 90s, and I think they voted 98% to stay in Canada, not because necessarily that they were great supporters of the federal government at that time, but rather that's who the treaties are signed with. It's signed with the Crown. And so the idea that they are going to renegotiate land claims and traditional lands with a new government not associated with the British Crown, I think, although Alberta may stay in the Commonwealth if it separates. I mean, that's an interesting possibility.
I think a referendum vote is just really good leverage to negotiate. It's a different reality. And I think more than anything, like somebody was saying that it would take 2 years for Alberta to leave, and I know people that are considering moving there right now, just because of this. I think it would be quicker to be a 51st state, but I don't know where I was going with this.
Well, if I can just chime in while you get your thought together, is that I think it's very unlikely, frankly, that maybe you could have a referendum. I'm not even sure if that's a likelihood. As much as the bar might have been lowered, I don't think Albertans want to separate. There is probably about a 20-25% core group that does support that sort of thing, but like Quebecers, when you kind of really dig down and try to understand the facts and the complications associated with such a separation, it does put you off. Would you still use the Canadian dollar? Would you still be part of trade agreements? Would the Canadian military have a place in a separate Alberta? All of these things are incredibly expensive and difficult, let alone something, let's say, like a pipeline that goes from Alberta to the BC coast. Who owns that? Right? When that oil crosses into BC, that's a whole other set of negotiations. And then, of course, you've already mentioned negotiations with First Nations. It is a pain in the butt to separate from Canada, and so it should be. Our Constitution makes it difficult on purpose, and to change the Constitution is incredibly difficult. So as much as there's grumblings about that and people who are upset that Pierre Poilievre did not win, I think that's just an outlet for them, and I'd be very surprised if that movement gets much momentum.
I guess we'll have to see. I mean, I think we barely talked about him, but we'll talk about before we go, is that like the next little while, especially regarding, involvement in, talks with the states and Trump and the tariffs, Carney's got a really interesting little while going ahead of him. And like, we don't know how long this minority government will last for, how long it'll be negotiated for. I'm sure it's a huge topic of the debate right now in discussion, but I guess we're keen to see how it goes.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, look, 169 seats is about as strong a minority as you can get mathematically. I guess 171 is even stronger. And as I say, it might not be a minority. And I think it will be a minority that will last a very long time. I mean, I cannot imagine the Bloc or the NDP being interested in going back to the polls at this time. They have a lot of rebuilding and thinking to do. So I'm going to say, we're going to have at least 3 years here.
I think so, too.
We might even make it all the way through 4 years. And again, actually, technically, we could go for 5 years because, again, we do have legislation that says an election every 4 years, but we don't actually have to do that. The Constitution actually says 5 years.
I revealed that there was a loophole to somebody once when they were telling me when there's an election coming. I says, no, you don't know.
No, again, the Constitution trumps legislation, but using that word Trump there, that was interesting. But yeah, that's the big challenge, no doubt about it. No surprise here. Carney and Trump renegotiating our relationship, and that's certainly first and foremost about trade and economics, which of course is Carney's big strength, the man at the moment, why he probably won. But there's also the question of our defense, right? This 2% target that we have signed on for as members of NATO, the Liberals and Conservatives both said they were going to meet that target by, I think it was 2030. And those promises have been made many times before by many governments, Stephen Harper, Justin Trudeau included, and they were not met. Because the second there's a recession, what ends up happening? We decide, those tens of billions of dollars we were going to spend on said piece of military equipment or a new base up in the north, gone. That's the first thing we cut. What else are you going to cut? You're going to cut healthcare subsidies, right? No.
I think we're safe this time because they will meet the targets because they're going to build some things and do it here as job creation as well. So it's an economic strategy to do that now. Yep. It would make sense. That's the investment part of what Carney's talking about.
And again, our place in NORAD as well. Yep. I mean, look, the defense file has been an embarrassment for Canada for decades, frankly, since those brutal cuts in the 1990s. Often called the decade of darkness if you were in the military. And, hopefully this prime minister will be able to turn that around. So I think those are the two big challenges for Carney, and he's got to get started right away.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, can't wait to see more.
The decade of darkness, by the way, followed the fall of the Soviet Union, right? And I do believe we thought we were going to need less.
Yeah, the peace dividend, we used to call it, right?
Yes,
and the Americans did the same thing.
Yeah.
Bill Clinton cut American defense spending, if you can imagine, Bill Clinton in his first term actually had a surplus for the American budget, if you can imagine. And so Canada went on hard times through the early 90s. Paul Martin was the finance minister. Massive cuts to everything, but the military was absolutely hammered, and frankly, has not recovered since.
Yeah.
And it's a
did
big
a poor
ask.
job there.
Yeah, exactly. And we'll see if those F-35s ever actually arrive.
Well, this is pretty cool. I like this.
This is good.
I think we've covered pretty well everything. The Alberta issue is going to be a long time before that's solved. We understand fairly well what happened here in the Nipissing-Timiskaming riding. Makes sense. And as far as overall, and Poilievre. Jesus.
Come on, Dave.
Well, you got Jesus' name right.
Yeah.
I mean,
He's-
so it's only been like, what, 4 weeks of election coverage and 3 years of him campaigning and trying to be a
Honest, I don't
household
do it on
name. All that just to not even win Carleton. But anyway, Professor, thank you for joining us.
Hey, my pleasure, and I'll see you guys in 4 years.
Yeah.
Hopefully sooner, but we appreciate you coming
happy.
on.
I'm happy to come on
it might be
anytime.
Pierre who?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. We'll figure it out.
Thank you everyone for listening. We do appreciate the coverage the last couple of weeks and just engaging with us on socials, our newsletter. And it's been a blast.
Do you have anything coming up that we can promote?
Oh, geez, I got a whole bunch of different things going on. I got a book coming out next year. I have an edited collection. I am organizing a conference on civic education.
When's that?
Oh, we're planning on it actually for 2026, perhaps 2027. It's a massive conference trying to really, and actually very relevant to our discussion today, really trying to teach young people about our country, about its history and politics, right, so that they are informed voters so we can have a resilient democracy. Civics, as it's now taught, isn't doing the job, and so we want a real reform of that curriculum.
That'll be just in time for the next election, maybe.
That's the goal.
Yeah,
Very
there
good.
you go.
Thank you for listening to Echo Essentials. I'm Chris Pekarski.
I'm Dave Dale.
Thanks a lot, guys. Take care.